New unit, new vocabulary. We're starting off with a word you should be familiar with, parallel. In algebra, we talked about parallel lines as two lines that never touch. In geometry, we need to go a bit further than that because we can start talking in three dimensions. So we still want to talk about lines that never touch, and our word for that is intersect, but now we require our lines to be coplanar in order to be parallel. What that means is they're on the same plane. In algebra, all of your lines are on the same two-dimensional coordinate plane. But in geometry, we have enough 3D figures that we need to differentiate coplanar lines versus non-coplanar lines. We use arrow tick marks to indicate that two lines are parallel. So note the arrow tick marks that are already in this diagram. The goal, just like with matching tick marks for congruence, is to match the number of arrows for parallel. So these lines each have one arrow. If they each had two, same idea, those will match up. You might find some with three. We won't usually deal with too many more than that. So you're just trying to match those arrow marks. Symbolically, since we're talking about lines here, we have line AB, we have line CD, and the notation for parallel is just two parallel line segments, kind of at a slash, an angle like that. So that symbol means parallel. In addition to parallel lines, we can also have parallel planes, just a couple of planes that never intersect. If we look over here on the right-hand side, notice we have plane J, and it's right above plane K. Those are planes that don't intersect. We use the same symbol to talk about parallel planes. Of course, we do need to name our planes differently. Our top plane is plane J, and our bottom plane is plane K. So that's all well and good. We've used this idea of parallel in previous classes. But because now we might jump into the third dimension, we can have lines which are called skew. Skew lines are lines that never intersect, but they're not quite parallel because they'll be on different planes. So skew lines are non-coplanar lines that never intersect. So if we look at this diagram on the right here, notice that we've got a rectangular prism, a three-dimensional object. If I just start picking on a random segment like PS, for example, and I'll go ahead and highlight that, PS, there are lines which will never intersect PS, something like VR, which I'll go ahead and make blue. VR is skew with PS. They will never intersect, but they're not on the same plane. So because they're not on the same plane, they are non-coplanar, and that makes them skew. There are other lines which are not coplanar with PS. UQ, for example. UQ is a skew line, but I'm just looking at one example here. Let's pick another random segment. Let's do TW. Let's do TW, and we can find skew lines for TW. Just like with PS, VR is skew. But I'm going to pick a different one just to have more examples. UQ is a good example here. UQ is a segment which is not coplanar and does not intersect, so it is skew. Let's take a look at one more. Let's do an up and down segment now. Let's look at PT. So PT is the segment we're starting with. To find one that's skew, again, there are multiple correct answers here. But one segment which is skew would be, let's see, I haven't messed around with anything in the back here at all. VW. VW is skew with PT. So skew lines, again, are just ones that are not coplanar, but they still don't intersect. And when we start talking about three-dimensional figures, these will become more common. Let's take a break from the vocab and jump into some examples. See you soon.